I can remember the opening ceremony in 1980, standing outside the gates and just tingling. The whole moment in my life that I'd driven for was there, right in front of me.
I never took for granted the opportunity to play for Australia, and it was always my boyhood dream was to represent Australia at the Olympic Games.
I've wanted to go to Olympic Games since I was like 6 years old. Like before I even had a sport to channel that energy into, I wanted to go to Olympic Games. I wanted to be part of that.
It impacts upon you strongly, getting to represent your country.
It's the greatest honour I've ever had bestowed upon me, and I remember the first time I was handed the jersey to wear, and every time I put that jersey on, I played as hard as I could. I wanted the nation to be proud of what I did for my country.
That was my brotherhood, my basketball brotherhood.
Even in the early days, it was said of the Australian basketballers that they had a strength and ruggedness matched by a grace and speed that could trouble the established powerhouses of the game. But how did an isolated nation of punters, lovers of the sun, surf and the green grass of the outdoors, ever rise to be so revered in this new indoor game sweeping the world? Few would have seen it coming in the 1950s, but as the host nation of the 1956 Olympics in Melbourne, a national team was quickly assembled amid some raw beginnings, and the program, albeit under less than ideal circumstances, was taking shape.
We didn't get together till we went to Melbourne and into the village, and that was when we started practicing. The original instructions came through to continue with whatever physical conditioning we were doing individually, and keeping in mind that everybody was working at the time. Everybody got asked to buy a book by an American coach, and we were asked to virtually read certain pages and look at certain moves or exercises, and that was really all our training till we got to Melbourne, into the village, and then we had whatever the week before that we were trying to see whether anybody has learned anything from the book or otherwise.
The 1960s were initially shaped by rivalries between dominant states. But it was the arrival of the new Australians, the Latvians, Lithuanians and Hungarians from war-torn Europe, that saw new styles and new skills arrive and elevated the local game to a new standard.
Most of the people were refugees in Germany for 4.5 years, so were camping there. Lucky we were in the American zone, spending that time in Germany playing against other groups, playing with or against the Americans. They really built a high level of competition and brought that to Australia.
The 60s still featured some teething issues, but a standout result at the Tokyo Olympics put Australia inside the world's top 10 and laid the foundation for a future built around a rugged defensive structure.
In 1960 in Rome, we had no clue on how to play defence. Our footwork was terrible, and if somebody wanted to run past us, they could, because we didn't react the way we should. Don Hogan from San Jose High School was the visiting coach, and he'd been around Australia and was on his way home, but he was there for 3 days. And introduced to the squad a lot of defensive drills that were designed to condition our muscles and our body so that when our mind said move, the body moved when it's supposed to. And that's what carried us through. We had the best defensive record in the pre-Olympic tournament, and we had, as I understand, the third best defensive record in the Olympic Games proper. Basketball was on the rise nationwide, and the American influences added momentum to the Lindsay Gaze-led teams into the next decade.
The expectations of the national team in 1972 were very, very low. When we went to Munich, we played some warm-up games, and it set tongues wagging a little bit when we beat Yugoslavia in one of these warm-up games. Those Olympics was probably, discounting Tokyo, which was something of a revelation at that time as well, that we were able to compete pretty favourably there. This was more like an awakening for us and the rest of the world that Australia may well be a basketball nation after all.
The influx of American players and teachers to our shores helped propagate the game, while the rise of the shuffle offence gave the Boomers our very own unique style of play and identity. creating havoc on the international hardwood and making up for some of our inherent physical limitations. The benefit of that was some top 10 finishes throughout the 1970s, which sowed the seed for a prosperous period to come.
When you're up against players where our tallest is equal to their smallest, if you try to beat them in their own game, you're really blowing in the wind. So it's not going to happen. But we found that we gave some of those teams nightmares in bringing their big players away from the basket, being able to identify players that we can go to for high percentage opportunities because of their skill, and it meant that we were always very competitive and annoying to the opposition because they didn't like chasing us around. That gave us a chance.
Enter the 1980s. Wide-eyed fans were filling stadium seats, and basketball was the hottest ticket in town.
The 80s was, that was the era. That was the most exciting time in basketball, I think, because of the development of the NBL.
The game had started to become professional probably about 1984. It was starting to head in that direction. The money was good, so we'd gone from being players that had held down jobs to part-time players to full-time players. So, the players now were able to spend more time on the court, more time in the weight room. So the game had evolved to a professional level, and obviously the more time you can put into the game, the better the players become.
These guys were making a living out of it, a job out of it, and like it or not, that's inspirational when you're a young bloke looking around to see what's going on. And so the Boomers, there was professional guys on it. If you were a Boomer, you had a chance to make a living out of basketball.
And things started to galvanise, and suddenly the respect for Australian basketball, suddenly instead of the respect being just for Lindsay Gaze, because other countries had recognised what he was against and what a good coach he was, now the team and the players were getting respect, and Australia started to be feared. And suddenly Australia was a place to come and play your games, even though geographically so far to travel, teams would come to Australia to play us to prepare for the Olympic Games.
The pivotal moment in all of that was when Australia played the Russians in a 6-match series twice in 2 years, in '87 and then again after that, because we played in front of full houses. And then we played in the Kareem series. That was the first game played at the Tennis Centre, and it was sold out. And all of a sudden, basketball was getting 15,000 people to a game. And that, I think that, a lot of people say or believe that the NBL gets all the credit for what happened in the 80s, and they did a marvellous job, and they did the day-to-day stuff. But I think those series with the Australian teams during that period really put basketball on the map.
And it was the young guns of the 80s who took the lead, some of whom were groomed through the new AIS, and others who were cashing in on the dazzling new league that was spawned of the boom.
Andrew Gaze was in his second Olympics. Phil Smythe was a real great Olympian at this time. Larry Senstock, we had Ray Borner and Wayne Carroll. We had that experienced group, but then we had this marvellous little group of Bradke, Longley and Vlahoff, all who were 18, 19, 20 years of age. And that was extremely controversial in my choosing those particular players, because they never played in the NBL. They were still playing in college in America, but I knew that they would become, in my own mind, they would become greats of the game.
Larry Senstock, who was an outstanding Olympian at 6'6", is competing against guys at 7'2", and suddenly we've got a 7'2" guy that can play, a 6'10" guy that can play, a physical imposing Vlahoff that can defend Oscar Smith, the best scorers in the world, and intimidate them. Suddenly we had tools that we had lacked before, and that, along with the experience that we were able to blend with that, made the team a little unique at that time.
In '88, we were considered an absolute significant upset to the rest of the world when we finished in the top 4. But from that point on, we'd gained the respect.
I think we were the best prepared we'd ever been, and for a long time anyway.
Other nations had taken notice of these 6-foot overachievers, but it was well into the 90s when all the stars aligned for the Boomers. Disappointed with the results of the 1992 Olympics, this core group of players, who had grown into the closest of friends, stood at the doorway to an unparalleled opportunity and what would become the watershed period for the Boomers program.
One of the things that basketball did, that the Australian government did, that the Institute did, whoever the contributors were, I don't want to get them in the wrong order, But they really kept us together as a group. They invested a lot of time and energy in, I talked about brotherhood, in having that sense of group.
It enabled us to have a long period of time where we have the nucleus of the team together. And because of that, and just through longevity, you get that understanding of your teammates. You learn not just about their basketball abilities, you learn about what makes them tick both on and off the floor.
You really do need that core solidarity, I think, and stability, which we had in the 90s in terms of the starting group particularly, but also in the majority of the team, that we were able to hone ourselves into quite a very good unit.
It doesn't work for everyone, it really worked for our national team, and so I think the fruit of that was that period you talk about in 96 and 2000.
Atlanta could have been, because I felt, I looked at the age group of the players, I looked at the time that they'd been playing, the experience internationally that they'd had. I thought Atlanta could be ours. And we had that special moment against Croatia, which was a fantastic achievement.
It was one of those games we always were in the contest, never a lot in it, had a bit of an advantage for most of it, but it come down to the dying moments where they were on a bit of a tear and reeled in a little bit of a lead, and it come down to a play where the scores were level, and I penetrated the ball and kicked it out to Tony Ronaldson in the corner, and Tony Ronaldson made the biggest shot of his life. And not only did he make the shot, he got fouled and went to the line and put the game beyond their reach.
To go the next step, and we just missed. 3 points. I've never watched the video of that game even today.
That is a game that I look back on that you lose a bit of sleep over, because that was our chance to finally win a medal, and it was a winnable game.
Despite the disappointment of what might have been, this was the Boomers at their mountaintop thus far, and the call to be part of a home Olympic Games in Sydney was irresistible.
Sydney, yes, I think we had the majority of players still around, but the competition, the field was tough.
We went into the Sydney Games with great expectations, but with the genuine belief on the back of what happened in '96 that we could win a medal. And I think that sometimes that's a little harder to do, because not only was it an expectation amongst the group, the public expectation was probably even higher. We knew that if we played really well, we could possibly win a medal, but we also knew we could play unbelievably well and come up empty, given the nature of the opposition.
We had our opportunities against France in that crossover game that unfortunately didn't go our way. Had we beaten France, we're playing for gold. It could have easily gone the other way.
The semi-final game against France, Luke Longley did his knee. He missed a significant portion of that game and then wasn't there for the next game in the bronze medal game. And that was it's not an excuse, but it certainly provided a handicap for us, and we weren't able to eventually win a medal. But we had tremendous respect from every other team. Really, since '88, everyone was sort of like, geez, we were a team that no one wanted to play.
Did we take our every opportunity? Yeah, look, I think we did. I mean, there was obviously, when you can go back and review, clearly we probably could have played better. We could have had a better offence or a better defence, and that's always 20/20 vision. But, I felt like we acquitted ourselves to a very high standard. I think we made Australia proud in how we discharged those responsibilities of wearing the green and gold, and at the end of the day, that's life. Sometimes you get there, sometimes you don't. The fact that we were quite close twice, I think about quite often. But does it bother me? No.
We beat some big basketball nations on our way to the 4th position, beating Italy, beating Spain, and beating the Russians. Were 3 high achievements in Australian basketball. So it was a moment I was very proud of. But when you come away empty and you don't come away with what you've gone away to get, it hangs around even today. If someone offered me the coaching job, I'd be back there having another crack, because you feel unfulfilled and you haven't achieved what you would have liked to achieve for Australian basketball.
After Sydney 2000, the time for change seemed all of a sudden overdue. The question was now being asked, what will be of this great program? after the superstars retire.
You know, we had such a good squad in 2000, and to fall short, just short. You know, I think that everyone kind of thought, oh, that was our last ditch at winning a medal. And then, you know, the transition of a lot of younger players coming through, it was a rebuilding phase.
Well, really, rebuilding the team, it was more starting over. You know, I think after 2000, a lot of the guys played maybe an extra Olympics due to the fact that they were in Sydney.
What you had in 2000 was all our international experience stopped, the experience of the players, and I think it's always a hard handover when you lose so many players plus the level that those players were at, and then to also then follow up by missing the World Championship, so those players that were starting the next process didn't get a chance to play in a major competition. And then it was all about 04 for a lot of us, was our first international experience. And I think, like I said, I felt like we had a crack and did okay, but there was definitely that part where it was all fairly new to us.
And then, come Athens, I think you know, you go in with every intent to win a medal, but I think it was just more to get respect in the I guess international realm again.
Eddie Jones said to me at that time, I asked him, I said, if you had one thing for me, what would you give me? And he goes, Brian, you got to be the best in the world at something. And you'll find out after Greece. You know, you put that in your pocket, but how hard that is. And when you think about, okay, we're going to be good at the controllables, we're going to be good at the effort areas, try to be better than Lithuania at the effort areas. When you've got a team that is in a whole country behind a team that is starving for a gold medal, and to be the best, you got to beat them. And when I came out of Greece, I carried that with me for the next four, because what the goal was, we didn't achieve in Greece. We weren't the best at the controllables. It was an important thing. We were trying to get better at it, but we weren't the best. And when we got to Beijing, there was, you know, to say we were the best, but there was a huge improvement in that area.
They had worn the brunt of great change, gathered themselves, and built towards another great assault on the world stage. Through the ups and downs of this evolving program, the principles which had developed in those early days and were passed along through the decades remained as strong as ever. After all, it is from which the fabric of the Boomers is made.
Australia was always perceived as a team that will keep coming at you. No matter how much they're down by, they had this great heart.
The strength of the Boomers was always that we played hard, that we were tough, that we never took a backward step. That was the trademark of the Boomers, and it still is.
We get that respect because that's the way we play, and that's why I have nothing but respect from the people who played before us, because they set out the reputation and stuff like that. But when I come back to camp and obviously in a leadership role now, it's not like I feel like it's one of the last things you ever think about is actually drilling in, like to have a crack or something or play hard. I mean, yes, I know from playing overseas that that's what everyone thinks of Australians, and that's great, but it's not something that needs to be spoke about because it's the way we do it here, and so it's that's pretty much a given.
This story of the Boomers is a sincere and stirring one, and still an unfinished one. Players united by boyhood dreams and the sense of brotherhood, achieving enormous things against the giants of the world. Undeterred, the aim remains the same as ever, that elusive Olympic Games medal in this great global game.